Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the latest episode of Rod and Ring Ancient Near East Meets Modern West. I am your host, Samuel David, and today's special guest is Ptahmassu Nofra-Uaa. He is an iconographer, a ritualist, a Kemetic polytheist, and an author. Hello, Ptahmassu. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you really very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
I love how people like us in our spiritual currents tend to gravitate towards physical environments that are in some way reflective of the region in which our quote unquote spiritual ancestors are from. I live in the American Midwest and I'm literally in a land between two rivers. So I have the Sangamon on one side, I have the Illinois River and the Mississippi River on the other. And you, being a devotee of the gods of Kemet, you are in the middle of a desert, which I find incredibly fascinating.
I am. So I live exactly on the border between Utah and Nevada in the United States of America. And what's very interesting about the topography here is that we have mountain ranges that look very similar to those on the West Bank near Luxor in Egypt, as well as in the Western Desert. They are stunningly red, a lot of iron oxide here, and their crags and crenellations look so much sometimes like the West Bank and the Luxor Thebes area. Um, and we have a highway that runs through the town, and there are trees and plants and some grass that has been planted. We have this little green strip on each side of the highway where all of the businesses or homes are huddled. And then just a few feet on each side outside of human buildings is literally desert and salt flats and these pyramidal shaped mountains everywhere. So we have a little strip. We don't have the Nile, but we have a modern highway running through the town, dividing it. And we also have East Wendover and West Wendover, and East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. It's very interesting here. Um, I don't live in civilization. I live in a bubble where what happens in Wendover stays in Wendover, and it's hard to describe the level of isolation here, but if you are a person who needs isolation, who needs to commune with the natural world and not feel overrun with the city and smog and crime and man-made environments that we have to deal with that overtake nature, come here because we don't have a real city. We don't have city services that are large. We don't have large scale buildings here. And at night, you have an unadulterated view of the sky. And for those of us who practice sacred astronomy and whose temples are governed by that, this is an ideal place for star watching and for tracking stars, constellations. It's an amazing environment. It's very isolated. So I think as a Kemetic, I feel close to Kemet out here.
Did you happen to just find yourself there one day and decide this is where I'm putting down roots? Or has the desert always been in your blood, if you will?
The desert, I would say, has always been in my blood. My father grew up in El Centro, California, in the middle of the desert in a little tiny town called Ocotillo Wells. And he used to take my brother and I out there all the time. And whenever we arrived, I just felt a connection, a spiritual connection to the desert. I felt like I belonged in the desert. And I've the story of how I wound up in Wendover is too long and convoluted, but I landed here not intending necessarily to stay forever. I still don't feel that I'm going to be here forever. I do have plans to hopefully relocate probably to Las Vegas, so that I don't leave the desert. But it has made thinking Kemetically, which is a term that I use. I don't know if I've coined it, but it's one that I've used, and it's one I talk about all the time. It makes thinking Kemetically very easy, putting myself in the mind frame of how the ancient Egyptians saw the deities and the spiritual realms through the actual environment in which they lived. And since I live in a similar environment, it's very easy for me to connect with that ethos and with that framework.
I've noticed in countless social media posts of yours, you
But,
are in the vast expanse of the desert. You have
yep.
your sacred iconography that you've so lovingly crafted, and to see the stages of that iconography progress amidst the desert environs and the the lavish the lavish banquets of offerings that you present is absolutely incredible. My question is, what was it that started you on this path to sacred iconography and creating these living, breathing works of art?
I was 6 years old when I was called to the gods. I self-dedicated, and I grew up in a heavily religious family that was a fundamentalist strain of baptism that was evangelical. But my father was studying anthropology for his degree, and we had a library in our house filled with books. And he, of course, had a huge library of Near Eastern, African, every part of the Near East. He had books on the anthropology, archaeology, and art of these countries. And we had a huge encyclopedia set as well. And I was actually looking for pictures of bald eagles because I had an obsession with bald eagles when I was very little. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to see them. I felt somehow connected to them. And I was very obsessed with them in this very weird way. So I went to the volume in my father's library to find eagles. And instead, I found the Egypt entry. And right when I saw the temples and the cult statues, something clicked inside me. And I remember my father was working on his drafting table. He was an architect, and I threw that volume down on his desk and pointed at a picture of Luxor Temple, and I said, "This is where I'm from." And my father thought that was very amusing and entertaining because I've always been very eccentric, and I was a very eccentric child. And I jumped from different obsessions. I had an obsession with dinosaurs, and I had an obsession with the American flag, and I had an obsession with bald eagles. I had an obsession with cowboys and Indians. And so when I all of a sudden had this obsession with everything ancient Egyptian, my parents did not take it seriously, and they thought this is just going to go away. He's just another little interest, and he'll move on to the next interest, as kids do. But I never did. And my father was also an artist. He was a very accomplished painter in many mediums. And my brother and I grew up learning how to paint from the techniques of the old masters: oil painting, watercolor, engraving, drawing, figure drawing, drawing from life, still lifes, all of these things. My father taught us everything he had learned. And I was painting before I was, doing my ABCs, before I was, I was drawing, I was painting, I was obsessed with art. But it was the art of Egypt that captivated me and romanced me and became a complete obsession. I mean, I was absolutely obsessed. Every single book in the public library, in the school library. I checked them all out. I copied the reliefs, I copied the paintings, I drew the statues, and I was absolutely convinced that somehow I was from Egypt, and that these deities that I was seeing in this book, that somehow they answered my prayers, that I could pray to them. And I started praying to Egyptian deities when I was 6 years old. And I I tore pages out of a book that I checked out from the school library that had these really neat, and I have this book in my library today. It had these 2 pages where the artists had painted these neat illustrations of Egyptian deities, but as portraits, like almost like modern portraits. So I tore the pages out and pinned them up on my bulletin board next to my bed. And before I went to sleep, I would pray to them. And this did not go down well with my father or with my parents. It began a very long and interesting and conflicting childhood of my parents trying to bend me to the will of Christianity, which I outright rejected as a child. I was raised in Christianity, and from the very beginning, when I heard I remember just being a very young child and sitting in church and thought, one God, this is not a good idea. This is, I am being lied to, because there's not one God. Not selling that to me. I always knew that there was more than one God. I was born with what I call polytheistic memory, and I have always known the gods. I've never not known them. And even before, really before I studied Egyptology, before I started studying as a serious discipline Egyptian history and language and art, I was praying to the Egyptian deities, and I didn't know who they were. I didn't know where they came from, and I didn't know the backstories of the civilization, but I knew the gods. So for me, the gods came first, and then the civilization of ancient Egypt and my obsession with that as a serious study came after. But I knew the gods first. And I don't think I had language for iconography, being an iconographer. I didn't have that as a child because I didn't know that that was a real discipline outside of Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox icons, Coptic icons, Christian iconography. I knew that was practiced and real. But as far as being able to do that for ancient polytheistic tradition, that language did not come into my vocabulary. I didn't consciously know that's what I was doing, I think, until probably my first year in high school. And then I realized that my obsession with the art was evolving into wanting to create images of the gods that could live and breathe. And I was still in my infancy then, as far as understanding living cult images and the technology for creating them, because that technology exists. It exists in the Egyptian tradition, it exists in the Mesopotamian tradition, it exists in the Babylonian tradition. In fact, as you are very well aware, in the Mesopotamian tradition, the mouth washing ritual exists, which is so almost identical to the mouth opening ritual that exists in Kemetic texts. And then the Babylonians actually have, they call that ritual the mouth opening ritual. So these civilizations all had the same ideals about the gods are the ones that are actually directing how their earthly images, the mirrors of themselves on earth, how these are to be born. And it's not human beings that are creating these images. Our hands might be doing the work, but the images already exist in the sphere of the gods before they exist in our sphere, before we are permitted to make a mirror of them on earth. So the gods create these images. These are not man-made images. No image of a deity in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia was man-made. These are made by the gods. We are allowed to bring them forward out of the sphere of the gods into our world with our hands. But it's the gods that are directing every single moment of that technology. I didn't know about that technology really until I was in high school. And I discovered the text for the mouth opening ritual and started to really study that and become obsessed with learning it and obsessed with how can we do this today? How is it possible? So I suppose that wasn't so succinct, but that's a very short, I left out a huge amount. And please ask questions so I can fill in more, but that's just trying to answer that question in a way that isn't going into every moment of my childhood.
So you do mention the opening of the mouth, which in the Mesopotamian traditions, there's the washing of the mouth, and
Yes.
I'm quite familiar with the washing of the mouth because there's several iterations and there are incredibly complex protocols that have to be taken. There are certain prayers, there are certain chants, there are certain times of the day in which
Yep.
these icons, the work of them having been born in heaven, there's actually a magical text, born in heaven,
Yes.
made on earth.
Made on
So
Earth. Yes.
so the gods are already existing. They're just waiting for their human tools to be, or their divine tools to be picked up by the human artisans in the priestly guilds to bring them forth.
Yes.
Do the Egyptians have a succinct set of ritual protocols and methods, or is it something that is a well-kept secret?
Succinct? No. Um, these are incredibly complex texts. The mouth opening ritual, which consists, at least currently in the historical record, 75 episodes, the largest body of the episodes that we have, the most complete version that we have, is from the tomb of Rekhmira. He was the vizier of Upper Egypt during the reign of Thutmose III and Amenhotep II. So we're talking about 1425 BCE was when Thutmose III died. And this set of episodes, the most complete set we have, was being utilized. There are a number of different texts where we have other episodes that we're pretty certain these are also part of it. The pyramid texts, which are the oldest body of religious literature in Egypt and in fact the entire world, do have a version of the mouth opening ritual. The mouth opening ritual is elements of it are mentioned in the coffin texts, which then evolve into the going forth by day or the Book of the Dead. If we examine the entire corpus of references that we have to this ritual, it is certainly possible to put together the entire framework, at least what the historical record allows us to do, in order to understand the mechanism, the technology for opening these images. Now, we have to also keep in mind that cult in ancient Egypt, which was a state-sanctioned milieu, that cult and the texts of each cult, each temple, each religious center, these are very specific to geographic locations. They're very specific to deity and even deity attributes,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Egyptian geography, as well as 5,000 years. So there are no two versions of the mouth opening ritual that are the exact same. And in fact, we can infer from this, from the historical record, actually, that the mouth opening ritual was done differently depending on cult, deity, type of statue, temple tradition, locale and the minutia of how each deity is being served and which aspect of a deity is being awakened in the image. So, but there are, across the board, there are enough similarities where in each version, there are certain things that always take place. There are purifications. There's the animal sacrifice. There are the purification with incense, the circumambulations. There is the use of the carpenter's adze. There is the use of what's called the pesheshkef, which is a bifurcated tool of obsidian that probably comes from midwifery. There are a number of things across all these versions that we can detect are the same. What I've done and what I utilize is I've done all of my research within the academic literature that exists. I've read every publication that there exists on mouth opening ritual. I have all of them. And what I had to do was develop a system based on the ancient texts that actually works and that the gods approve of, because that's another thing. And this is something that Reconstructionists, I feel, sometimes in their striving to get things right, their attitude winds up being wrong because they're so inflexible, only going by what actually exists and the interpretation of that by scholars who actually have never performed these rituals.
Yeah, I
Let me tell, yeah,
I have encountered that myself, and for the longest time, if anyone would ask, I would say, "Oh, I'm a Sumerian Reconstructionist or a Mesopotamian Reconstructionist." And now I had a fascinating interview with Shawnee Oates some time ago, and she had mentioned the importance of the continuation of cult versus Reconstruction, because Reconstruction is focusing on a specific period in time, and as we all know, these cultures, they flourished and they evolved and they adapted and they were invaded and conquered, and they established trade relations. And you know, just as with Mesopotamia, in Egypt, there's the entirety of the Mediterranean in which trade was established with all of these neighboring cultures. So there's no such thing as a static religion that can thrive. It has to adapt. And ever since then, I'm just a polytheist and I'm continuing a cult. Because there's this horrible tendency to reenact versus reconstruct. And when you get lost in those details and you're not allowing the gods to provide that spark of genius, because your only slavish devotion is to the page instead of to the power that would animate these things. I just, I could go on a tangent myself. But it's your interview, not mine.
No, I mean, everything you're saying, I couldn't add to it. It's perfect. Yes, the gods are real. Let's agree with that. Let's start there. The gods exist. The gods are not archetypes. The gods are not thought forms. The gods are not dependent on the human condition in any way. The gods pre-exist us. They pre-exist our sphere of creation. They do not need us. We need them. And the stipulations for cultists change. They change with geography. They change with time period. They change because the human condition changes. And the gods are engaging us. We are engaging the gods. And the gods meet us where we are. And the gods, their demands, their requirements, their stipulations will change depending on who is coming before them and desiring engagement. And if we are only obsessed with scholastic work and academics, the majority of whom are divorced from religion as a living, organic, and fluid institution of the human mind and spirit, if we are relying on their interpretation, we are divorcing ourselves from the experience of the living gods. If we're only relying on scholars. Now, if we are marrying the worlds of doing scholastic research, digging into the historical record as much as we can, but always making sure that we take that to our gods. Is this what you want? It is about establishing right relationship with the deities. What is right relationship? Right relationship is whatever the gods are pleased by, whatever the gods will accept from human beings when we try to engage them. Right relationship is whatever the gods say it is at any given moment. In one temple or in one location, a deity might be very receptive to a certain type of fruit. This is what they require in order to do a certain ritual. That same deity in a different location might reject this procedure and ask for something else. We know this in Mesopotamia because of temple records. We know this in Babylon because of temple records. We know this in Egypt because of temple records, that cultus evolves and changes over time. So if we're just playing dress up, if we are just doing ye old Renaissance fair,
Yeah.
but with Kemetic getup or Mesopotamian getup, we are not living real religion. We are not connecting with the living gods, and that is all I care about. So everything that I do in my work, I research the historical texts, I research the historical records, I gather everything that I can. But in everything I do, I ask the gods and I make sure that I'm establishing right relationship with them. There are certain things they've made very clear they reject, they aren't interested, they don't want it, and it can't be done that way now. It's funny to me that all Kemetic reconstructionists that I know that are very bent on by the book, they'll be the first person to say, well, but what you're doing, that's not exactly how it was done in the New Kingdom. I'm not living in the New Kingdom. I mean, I'm in the 21st century, just letting everybody
Exactly.
know. I'm not interested in living in the New Kingdom. No, thank you. But if we're going to do things by the book, I know of no Kemetic reconstructionist that performs animal sacrifice. I do not. I'm not qualified. I'm not a qualified knife wielder, and I don't raise livestock. I'm not qualified to do it. I don't do it. But my gods have not asked me to do that because I'm not qualified to do it anyways. But the slaughtering of the bovines and then the burning of the meat and the apportioning of the meat into sacred proportions was done in every major temple in Egypt every single day. It had state cultic implications of being the enemies of the state, representing the enemies of the gods. The meat, the animal being slaughtered represents the forces of chaos, represents the enemies of the god and the king of Egypt. So basically the enemies of the cosmos. Every temple did this every day. It was done for 6,000 years. I know of no Kemetic reconstructionist. They'll be the first to tell me that I'm not doing something right. Well, are you slitting the throat of the sacred bovines and cutting, the forelegs and portioning the meat exactly as it was done in Luxor Temple? And as are you doing that? Oh, well, of course I don't believe in animal sacrifice because it's so you can pick and choose.
That's where
You
we're
can
drawing the
pick and
line.
choose. You can pick and choose what you think fits today. Why can't we apply that attitude to everything else? That we aren't living in the Bronze Age, surprise, and not everything that was done in the Bronze Age is something the gods will accept now or want now or is applicable now, especially because we are not Nilotic people anymore. We are not living in Mesopotamia anymore. We are people practicing these ancient religions way outside of their original cultural ethos. How can we do it then? If not through making a connection with the living gods and creating right relationship with them so that our current communities flourish and our current relationships flourish.
How does that translate to establishing and maintaining a right relationship with the land in which you inhabit that these gods were not native to?
Let's talk about local gods, local deities. This concept is somehow polytheist. Polytheists today, a lot of them don't enter into this concept or understand how it works. First of all, you have to know who your local deities are. But you might say, well, wait a minute. I'm worshiping Mesopotamian deities. I'm worshiping Kemetic deities. I'm not in Mesopotamia. I'm not in Kemet. So how can those deities be local? Aha. Perfect question. And my answer is this. And it's exemplified in the historical record of all societies in the ancient world. And that is every time a community, wherever they are, appeal to a deity, and that deity receives cultus and answers prayers and shows signs, whether through divination, whatever the process may be that the deities and the people of the community have agreed on, whenever that deity shows that they are favoring that community, that deity has become your local deity. In the Mediterranean world, Alexander the Great in 332 BCE comes into Egypt, liberates Egypt from Persian rule, and becomes the Pharaoh of Egypt, beginning the spread of Hellenism throughout the entire known world at that time. And something wonderful happened, and that was everywhere that Alexander the Great's armies went, they were bringing deities from the lands that they just went through. They were adopting, these were Greek, not even just Greek. I mean, they had mercenaries from all the lands they were conquering along the way, and they were marching with Alexander. They were bringing their own gods.
Yeah.
They had their own family gods, their own local gods. But we know that Alexander the Great's army that he had with him, they would dress in Persian dress. Some of them would take Persian wives or foreign wives and mistresses, and they would adopt those gods. So when they landed in these foreign towns, they were Greek, they were Greeks, they're Macedonians, they had their own family deities from Greece. On top of that, they might be also worshiping Persian gods and Egyptian gods. I mean, it was very interesting. The hybrid of cults that came out of that environment is astonishing. And the cult of Isis from Egypt is one of those that wound up spreading. It took off throughout all the ancient world. It is amazing that we find in London and Britain, we find the remains of Isiums. We know that the cult of Isis spread everywhere through the Levant, through the Mediterranean, into Britain. And all of these local spin-offs, these local forms of Isis and other Egyptian gods too. We have Hermanubis, the Romans worshipped him. We have all kinds of very interesting deities and cults coming out of this hybrid of cultures where everyone's gods are meeting, and all these traditions are melding together, and these different cults are coming into play. And my point about all of this is that Isis Aphrodite, Isis Demeter, these goddesses became local deities. You have an Egyptian goddess who becomes a local goddess. It was happening in Athens. It happened in Rome. It happened in Pompeii. That was where the cult of Isis was especially strong. And you have an Egyptian goddess who all of a sudden is Isis Demeter, Isis Aphrodite, all these other forms. She became a local goddess to all the different communities that she entered. And my point about that is that is exactly how the gods are still operating and exactly how we can think of them. Wherever you are in the world, if you are making a petition as an individual or as a community, you are petitioning a deity. If that deity shows you that they are receiving your cultus and your prayers, how do you know it? The dispensing of boons. Let me tell you, I know when I've gotten it right, when my deities receive my sacrifice, when they receive my prayers, because boom, all of a sudden, whether it's a check in the mail, whether it's whatever, something I've been praying for, right away, my gods let me know, I am happy with your offering. I'm happy with what you're doing. Really important, though, is if you're going to be doing this practice of finding your local deities and such as making pilgrimages and doing things, that has to come with a certain level of responsibility that I want to mention. And that is this land, is it a First Nations land? Is it private land? Does it belong to someone else's religion? Is a sacred site for someone else? Do I have a right to go into this space? Please don't violate those things, and please know about them. Do your research, find out, go to your chamber of commerce, go to wherever you need to go to and find out if land is public, if you're able to go there, if it's spoken for some from someone else's religion. Don't cross that boundary and don't violate that. That's my disclaimer there. I'm very lucky to live in a place where all of this is public land. All of the desert is part of a public park system where anybody can go and camp, anybody can go on this land at all times. It's not private, it's for the public, and it's part of a public park system. So anybody can use it. And that's the only reason why we do pilgrimages, and I do the things you see on social media. Also because we have the gods' permissions. In fact, we have a very interesting mountain peak here called Pazuzu Peak. We named it for Pazuzu.
I love it.
Well, we named it for Pazuzu because he had answered a very specific prayer, a defense prayer that I had. And when we entered this town, I had a dream in which Pazuzu was standing on top of this mountain, and he said, "This is mine. Know me here." So when we're allowed, we go, we make offerings, we go to the top, and the wind howls, blows from the southwest, especially, I must say. And that's Pazuzu's sacred ground. That's where I honor Pazuzu. I don't honor Pazuzu in a Kemetic ethos. Obviously, I honor him in his own ethos. It's not something I would ever transgress. But Pazuzu is a very interesting deity, and in my opinion, he is a god. He's not just a demon or a spirit. He's a god. He has presented himself to me as a god, and that's the only way that I come to him, knowing, because that's what he wants. How he is for other people, I can't say. But Pazuzu is one of our local deities. He's protected us, and he certainly makes it clear that he loves this specific place in Wendover. It's his high place, and the wind is always crazy there. It's very interesting.
So you had mentioned divination and the importance thereof. Let's talk about the divination system that you frequently showcase on your social media, the tile pieces with
Waju.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm.
Is that something that developed on its own after years of research, or is it something that you intuited along the way?
It's something I was forced into.
And by forced, please elaborate.
Because throughout my entire life, I have gone on a hunt for other systems of divination. I was trying to find the right system of divination for my work and to please the gods. I have looked at everything, and I've tried everything. And it's not that any system failed. No other system has failed. It wasn't that these systems are not whole and complete and sacred within themselves, but I wasn't finding the right thing for my practice that the gods would accept from me. Because the gods have to, and the powers have to accept the tools that we want to use to engage them. It's a two-way relationship. Just because tarot works for you does not mean that your deities are going to agree to communicate through that medium. They may say, "I don't want that." And that kept happening to me. And I got very frustrated, and I got very angry about it, because I was trying to do my work and I needed a system of divination that the gods would agree to use, where I knew that without question that they were using to speak to me through. And I kept coming up against this roadblock, and it was really becoming a bar to my practice. So I finally did dream incubation, and in my dream, I yelled at Ptah and I said, "What do you want? Make it clear. Show me what you want, and I will do it." So he showed me what are called the waju. Waju is the plural for the Egyptian word waj, which means stela. Stelae, of course, they come in many shapes and sizes. Kemetically speaking, sometimes they're very small in wood, sometimes they're very small in clay, but they actually look like old gravestones. They have a rounded top and then a rectangular structure beneath. And Ptah showed me the waju, and he showed me the hieroglyphs. He showed me everything. So I developed the system and started working it until I got it right, because I went through, the gods were like, "Nope, you're not getting it right. Nope, you're not getting it right." They let me know that I wasn't working it the right way. It took me a number of years to finally arrive where I was confident and I knew I got it. I've got it.
In addition to your sacred iconography, you have also published some material, and you have recently signed a contract for forthcoming work with an introduction by Dr. Suda. I'd like to know more. What could you tell our viewers and listeners?
So I was approached by the acquisitions director, a wonderful priestess of Isis, actually, who was ordained in the very temple that I was ordained in. She approached me on social media because she was very interested in the possibility of Schiffer books that she works for, and Red Feather, the imprint of Schiffer. They're interested in producing reproductions of my icons, and also interested in my oracle, and also interested in my writing. And she wanted to know, would I be open? Would I be interested in discussing the possibilities of going forward with some kind of project and publication? And we hit it off right away. All you have to do, gods, is send me a priestess of Isis and I'm on board. You know, I mean, it was so obvious that this was the gods. It was just so obvious that I just had to go. The gods are so clever. They know exactly how to make me say yes to something. So what is happening is, what I've signed a contract for is a multi-project deal, and that will also include more than one book, and it will also include eventually the Waju tablets, which we are actually going to create as tablets. So they won't be cards, they'll actually be tablets. They won't be made out of the same materials, unfortunately, that my master set is, but that would make them too expensive. What we are aiming at is producing the highest quality materials for people, but at a price that everyone can have access to, and it doesn't cut people off. That was really important to me, and it was really important. It's really important to Schiffer Books. They really want to do that for their customers. So I really like their ethos in that way. But we're starting off with a project called Opening the Ways, which is a travel altar, travel shrine set, which will have inside, I'm not going to give away exactly what they will be, but these will be reproductions of my work that no one has seen the likes. The materials that they're going to use, the way they're going to be produced, I mean, these are luxe. These are going to be nothing short of miraculous and beautiful. And they will be usable for ritual. They'll be usable for pilgrimage. They will be usable for all the different things that you want. And the set will also include a lot of other enhanced goodies that I'm not going to say, but this will be something that people can take with them, take on a trip, have beside your bed, have in your shrine area, whatever. It's going to be meant to be travel friendly, user friendly for people to have the gods with them wherever they go. And included in that will, of course, be my book, Opening the Ways, which will be not only taking people through the journey of each deity, of each icon, but meeting each of these gods, prayers, practices, chants, ancient texts, which will be presented in the original language. For people who are interested in tapping into the ethos that way, magical practices, practices for developing your relationship with these gods. So basically, you'll have a travel-friendly kit that can give you a whole practice.
That's incredible.
Dr. Suda, I have known her since 1996. She's an incredible, incredible human being who not only has founded an entire Kemetic religion, which in itself is a feat of miraculous engineering, but her level of dedication to Kemetics in general is so genuine and is something that has truly guided my life. I'm not a member of House of Nature. I was not divined into her tradition. And yet she has constantly given to me of her time and her resources and her energy and been dedicated to helping me serve the gods in the very best way that can be done. And she has bothered me for years. Every year she'll say, "Are you doing a book? Are you writing a book? You need to do a book." Yeah, maybe I'm busy right now. And then when she very kindly, generously approached me to find out if I would donate pictures of my icons for her book, The Complete Encyclopedia of Egyptian Deities, of course I said yes. But she said, after I opened up my copy and I saw my work, she said, "See, look how beautiful your work looks. You need to do a book." And now again, I just, people keep bothering me to do a book. And I'm so busy. Um, and I knew it would come up sooner or later, but basically I told the gods, "I'll do a book when you force me to."
Plot twist.
So then I was approached by Schiffer Books to do this, and um it's incredible. I've started writing the book, and the material is amazing. I'm very proud of it, and I think that everyone, whether you're a Kemetic or not, because I'm not writing the book just for Kemetics, I'm writing the book for anyone who wants to connect with these deities. And that means anybody, whether you're Wiccan, whether you're pagan, whether you're neo-pagan, whether you're a witch, whether you're a Reconstructionist, whatever your calling to these gods happens to come through, you're going to be able to love this material and dig in and find hopefully some things that you can actually integrate into your own practice.
So prior to this work, you have also published another book.
Sacred Verses, Entering the Labyrinth of the Gods, it's not Kemetic right away. There are parts of it that do certainly resonate. Kemetics would go, okay, that's where this is coming from. But Sacred Verses was written in state of religious ecstasy, part of a much larger work, which is as yet an unpublished manuscript of 900 pages called The Tree of Memory, which is a book for polytheists and pagans. Sacred Verses is drawn out of that material. The entire book is meant to be a book of initiation. Will it see the light of day? I was going to self-publish, but I'm leaving it open for a publisher who wants to publish a mammoth and I would say a very great work, if I may be so unhumble as to say that. Someone someday, I think a publisher is going to see my material and go, "You know what? We need to publish this work. This should be out there." But I don't know yet. I'd like it to be published whole, which is 900 pages long, thereabouts. I don't know if that will happen in my lifetime. But Sacred Verses is a journey. It's an initiatic journey of 42 initiations that the reader will go on to go through, being taken into the underworld and meeting their powers, meeting their deities, and having these initiations that when they come out of that, they will belong to their gods and powers, and they will have that gnosis.
I am with them through the gates, these gods that come forth from the clouds, these gods that divide the sky into regions of north and south, the north coming down as the breath I breathe when my mouth is open, when they who excel the clouds have parted my lips to kiss life, whereupon the north is my lover and the south has flowed up to dance across my feet, and I stay with these gods, my breath and feet have known. I'm with them through the passage land, these gods that speak in the stone and mountains, these gods that unite the earth and sky to make a spirit body in the east and west, the east being theirs from which the sun is born, where I rise up my solar bones from slumber, and it is here that my flesh becomes gold. Glimmer on my skin, you gods of the dawn, who appear on blue waters above and below. Take my hand into your reflection to pass from the surface and into your realm of light. Let the west take on my shadow, and when he comes to cast his shade over the earth, let him dance across my thighs again, and I stay with these gods. My bones and thighs have known.
I've had a lot of feedback from people. It's interesting how people all over the world who've written to me have tell me that they're using it for bibliomancy, which is something that I use it for, but I never talked about it. And different people who don't know each other saying, I'm using it for bibliomancy. Is that okay? This is my experience. And I'm just like, it's interesting that people pick up on that right away. It's been difficult because books of just verse or poetry are generally not something that people will pick up or buy. People who know when they buy it and they start reading it, they'll go, yeah, this isn't poetry. I've had people say, these are magic spells. Yes, they are actually. These are utterances that are meant to be read out loud and they're meant to be used in ritual. Yes, they are. These are for bibliomancy. Yes, they are actually. It's not a cookbook yet, but other than that, it's all of those things. And one of the projects that I've talked to Schiffer Books about is the Sacred versus Initiatic Oracle, which is totally different than the Oracle, the Watch Tablet Oracle. It's a totally different type of Oracle. And then Sacred versus Magic, because Sacred versus actually presents its own complete magical system. So I do have those works that I am running by Schiffer, and they've been very, very intrigued. And we will see about the future of those in the future. But right now, it's opening the ways, and then it will be the Waj Tablet Oracle with companion book, obviously. I guess maybe a great way for us to lead the discussion, since I know we need to wrap it up, is for all of us in these communities to think about hospitality, to think about as we're doing our work for our gods, right, in our own traditions, that we might encounter polytheists and pagans who are of a different tradition than us. But if we think about how, if we are willing to open up some hospitality and help others in their walk with their gods, who are we really helping? We're helping serve our gods.
Mm-hmm.
If we serve other people, we're open to discussion, to debate, to contact. It doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice our own ideas or our own way of doing our traditions, but be open to communicating with one another, because we have enough as polytheists and pagans against us in the outside world that
Absolutely.
I think we need to be hospitable to one another and help one another serve our different gods the best that we can. And that's my personal value system. It's something that I really try to live by. I'm open to people in different traditions. If I can help, if I can reach out, if I can encourage other people, I'm going to do what I can do, because if I help you serve your gods better, my gods are going to be very happy with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm helping the gods get served.
Yeah.
So I think we can
Incredible.
all do that.
Yes, absolutely. So, having said that,
Yes.
where can people find you online?
On Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, by looking up my name, and visit my website, visit my social media. If you want to drop by and say hi, please say hi to me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm very welcoming and I really love hearing from people and sharing with other pagans and polytheists and people of other Eastern traditions, especially. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to me and give me a holler through my social media, through my website.
Excellent. And again, I will put those links in the show notes. I will also have your your book titles in the show notes as well. Well, once again, Ptahmassu, I really want to thank you for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your inner world with our viewers and listeners, and I will certainly see you online.
Thank you so much. It was really an honor for me to be here. I appreciate it and look forward to talking with all of you again soon, hopefully.